In almost every public battle, the real fight is never the fight itself. The real fight is the fight over what the fight is about. This means establishing the terms that are used to describe the fight. And when you're defining the fight, you're much more likely to win the fight. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan with a reflection on life and liberty. Let me start with an example. In the crisis at the U.S. border with Mexico, there's a widely divergent set of acceptable policy outcomes that flow depending on whether those crossing the border without permission are referred to as undocumented migrants or illegal aliens. A border invasion requires an entirely different approach than a humanitarian crisis. But perhaps more important even are the brand names used to define opponents to public policy. In the modern era, Donald Trump has become the master of the put-down nickname. No one can think of poor Jeb Bush without thinking of him as low-energy Jeb, and Hillary Clinton will forever be crooked Hillary. But no one in history seems to have understood this better or employed it more successfully than the Roman Emperor Hadrian. After the famous Jewish revolt of 68 to 73 AD, which included Jerusalem's destruction, everyone in Rome thought their Jewish problem had been put to rest. Not so, replied the remaining zealots and their descendants. The Bar Kokhba revolt of 132 to 136 AD was similarly unsuccessful, but it managed to infuriate Hadrian. Therefore, Hadrian resolved to wipe Jews and Israel from the map. Literally. Throughout Roman rule, the region had been known as Judea. Why? Well, because 1,000 years earlier, Israel had split into two kingdoms, one in the north, called Israel, and one in the south, including Jerusalem, called Judea. Over time, the second name became synonymous with the region for the ancient peoples. So Hadrian decided to change the name. He looked back in history and remembered that the hated enemies of Israel from centuries earlier had come from Crete. They were known as Sea People and had established cities in the land of the Jews. Don't remember Sea People? Sure you do. The name is rendered in the Bible as the Philistines. Hadrian merely Latinized the Hebrew name to Palestina. Henceforth, in the records of Rome and the successor overlords, the region was known as Palestine. But to be clear, there never was a nation or people who called themselves that name in any sense other than as an enemy of Israel. It was a name employed by an angry pagan emperor who hated the Jews. Hadrian understood that by changing the name, he could change the terms of the debate. It would be easier to eradicate the Jews from the land of Judea if their name was stricken from the land itself. Naming, framing, and branding are important skills for engaged citizens to identify and employ. More importantly, we need to be wary of using the brands and definitions set by our political opponents. And frankly, we should be more aggressive in framing both opponents and policies in ways that make it easier for our fellow citizens to join the fight. If you like today's podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate it, leave a review, and encourage your friends to listen. The Reflections on Life and Liberty podcast is presented by Texas Scorecard, and today's edition was produced by Nick Shepard in the 1836 studios. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan. Thanks for listening.